They called me the family's shame for 11 years before they finally destroyed me completely. I was the daughter who was never quite good enough, never quite pretty enough, never quite worth defending, while my stepsister Camille got the smiles, the trust funds, and the corner office, with her name already on the door, before she had earned a single day of it. When Camille's reckless trading nearly collapsed our father's investment firm, I was the one who signed the confession. I was the one who went in front of the board and said the losses were mine. I did it because my father asked me to quietly in his office, the way you would ask someone to pick up dry cleaning. "Protect the family name, Sienna," he said. "You understand how these things work." I understood. I understood that I had spent my whole life being the thing this family sacrificed whenever something needed sacrificing. 2 years after I took that blame, with my name ruined and my own money gone, Camille had me removed from the family trust entirely, claiming I was a liability the firm could no longer be associated with. I found out later that she had orchestrated the entire trading disaster on purpose, to test how far I would go to protect a family that had never once protected me. I found out because a lawyer sent me an anonymous file 6 months before I died, and I was too broken by then to do anything but read it and cry in an apartment I could no longer afford. I died on a rainy October night, in a car that Camille arranged to have serviced by a mechanic on her payroll, on a road I drove every week to visit the one person who still believed in me, an old family accountant named Warren, who had tried for years to warn me what my stepsister really was. The brakes failed on a curve I had driven 1,000 times. I remember the headlights spinning and then nothing. Nothing, until I opened my eyes in a bed I recognized instantly, in a room with pale yellow walls I had painted over years ago in my old apartment. Except this was not my old apartment. This was my childhood bedroom in my father's house, the one I had not slept in since I was 24 years old. I sat up so fast my head spun, and on my nightstand was a calendar open to a date I recognized with a cold, sick jolt. It was the morning of the board meeting. The morning I had signed Camille's confession as my own. I was 24 again, 10 years younger, 10 years earlier, with every memory of everything that came after still fully intact in my mind. I did not have a system. I did not have glowing notifications or magical rewards waiting for me in the corner of my vision. What I had was worse for my family and better for me. I had 10 years of memory that had not happened yet, and this time, I was not going to spend a single one of them protecting people who had let me die on a road they knew was dangerous. There was something else I remembered too, something I had buried so deep in my old life that I only let myself think about it in the last weeks before I died. I was not actually my father's daughter by blood. My mother had married Gerald Voss when I was 2 years old, after my biological father passed away, and Gerald had adopted me formally within the year. Camille was his blood daughter from his first marriage. For 11 years, I had told myself that the way this family treated me had nothing to do with that fact, that it was simply about who tried harder, who behaved better, who deserved more. In my old life, I found out 3 weeks before I died that Camille had always known the difference mattered more than anyone admitted, and had used it quietly for years to remind our father who his real family was whenever it was convenient. I remembered lying there in that childhood bed, a specific afternoon when I was 12 years old, standing outside my father's study while he told a business partner over the phone that his daughter, Camille, was going to run this company one day, real pride in his voice. The kind of pride I never once heard him use when my name came up in conversation. I remembered walking away from that door and deciding, quietly, the way children decide things that shape the rest of their lives, that if I could not be loved the way Camille was loved, I would at least be useful enough that they could never fully get rid of me. It took dying on a rainy road at 34 years old to understand how much of my life I had spent chasing a kind of belonging that was never going to be handed to me, no matter how useful I made myself. I went downstairs that morning and found my father already reviewing the trading reports Camille had falsified, the same reports I remembered signing my name to in my old life. This time, before he could ask me into his office, I sat down across from him at the breakfast table and asked him a question I never had the courage to ask the first time around. "Dad," I said, "why does it always have to be me?" He looked up surprised, the same practiced patience on his face that I used to mistake for love. "What do you mean, Sienna?" "I mean the last 3 years," I said. "Every mistake in this family gets fixed by putting my name on it. Camille's trading losses. The tax irregularities from the Chicago property. The vendor lawsuit nobody wanted the press asking about. All of it, quietly, my signature, my name, my reputation. Why is that always the solution? My father set down his coffee slowly. This family protects itself, Sienna. We all contribute in the ways we can. And what do I get in return? I asked. He did not have an answer for that because in 11 years, he never once had. I spent the next several weeks doing something I had never done in my first life. I started paying attention. Really paying attention. The way you do when you already know exactly which doors are about to close on you. I found Warren, the old family accountant, before Camille ever managed to sideline him. And instead of waiting for him to hand me a file after everything was already ruined, I asked him directly what he knew. He looked at me for a long moment. The same careful way people look at you when they are deciding whether you can be trusted with something dangerous. Miss Sienna, he finally said, I have been keeping records for 3 years that your father has never asked to see. Because I think someone in this family has been moving money in ways the board would not approve of. Show me everything, I told him. Every account, every discrepancy, every transfer. I am not signing my name to anything I have not personally verified, not this time. He studied my face for a long moment, as if trying to understand why the daughter he had watched be quietly erased for a decade had suddenly stopped flinching. You sound different, Miss Sienna, he said finally. I am different, Warren, I told him. I just do not expect you to understand why yet. What Warren showed me over the following month confirmed everything. I already knew from a life I was not supposed to remember. Camille had been quietly siphoning funds from 3 subsidiary accounts for years, disguising the losses as market volatility, and positioning the eventual collapse to look exactly like a trading error that someone else would need to answer for. She had also been working closely with a rival firm run by a man named Aaron Delacroix, feeding him confidential, positioning data in exchange for a guaranteed executive seat once our father's firm was weakened enough to be acquired. In my old life, I never learned about Delacroix at all. I had been too busy drowning to notice, the second knife being sharpened behind the first one. This time, when Camille came to me 3 weeks before the board meeting, sweet and worried in the way she only ever was when she needed something, and asked if I would consider taking responsibility for what she called an unfortunate oversight. In the trading division, I asked her a single question. What happens to you if I say no? Her smile faltered, just slightly, just enough. Sienna, she said, this is bigger than either of us. The company cannot survive this becoming public with my name attached to it. Then maybe, I said, it should not have happened with your name attached to it in the first place. Before the board meeting, I paid a visit to Aaron Delacroix myself, without telling anyone, including Warren. I told him plainly that I knew about the confidential data he had been receiving, and that I had documentation to prove it, but that I was more interested in what happened next than in what had already happened. He was a careful man, the kind who survives in that industry by never committing fully to anyone else's fight. If you go to the board with what you have, he said eventually, I will not defend Camille. I have no loyalty to her beyond what she was useful for. That was all I needed to hear. I did not need him as an ally. I only needed him to stay out of the way when the moment came. And men like Delacroix are always willing to abandon a sinking arrangement the instant it stops benefiting them. I did not go to the board meeting empty-handed. I brought Warren, and I brought 18 months of financial records that Camille did not know existed, including the correspondence trail with Delacroix's firm, because in my first life, I had never once thought to look for any of it until it was far too late to matter. I stood in front of my father, the board, and my stepmother Diane, who had spent a decade calling me difficult every time I asked an honest question, and I laid out exactly what had happened to the subsidiary accounts, who had authorized the transfers, where the missing funds had actually gone, and the private arrangement Camille had made with a competing firm to weaken us from the inside. Camille tried to interrupt twice. Both times, Warren produced another document that made her stop talking entirely. This is a fabrication, Camille finally said, her voice cracking in a way I had never once heard in my old life. Because in my old life, she never had to defend herself against anything. I looked at her, really looked at her. The way I used to look at my father across that breakfast table, waiting for an answer that never came. I am not the one who fabricated anything, Camille, I said. I am simply the one who finally stopped taking the blame for it. The board voted that afternoon to remove Camille from her position and to open a formal investigation into the missing funds, with full cooperation promised to any regulatory body that came asking. My father did not speak to me for 3 days afterward, which told me everything. I needed to know about where his loyalty had truly lived all along. When he finally did speak to me, it was to ask quietly in his office, the way he always asked things, whether there was any way to keep this contained within the family. I thought about that road, the one with the curve I had driven 1,000 times, and the mechanic on Camille's payroll, and the 10 years I had already lived and died once trying to protect, a family name that had never once protected me back. There is no more containing it, I told him. There is only what happens next, and I am no longer going to be the one who pays for it. Diane tried a different approach a week later, cornering me in the kitchen with the same soft, wounded voice she used whenever she needed me to feel guilty about something. That was never my fault to begin with. You could destroy this entire family, Sienna, she said. Is that really who you want to be? I thought about that question for a long time, because it was the same question, in different words, that I had been asking myself since the moment I woke up 10 years younger with a decade of memories no one else could see. I am not destroying this family, Diane, I said. I am simply refusing to be destroyed by it any longer. There is a difference, even if you have never had to learn it. In the weeks after the board meeting, while the investigation into Camille was still unfolding, a financial reporter named Patricia Hale reached out requesting a comment on the unfolding scandal. The same reporter who, in my old life, had written a brief, dismissive paragraph about my resignation and moved on to more interesting stories within a week. This time, I agreed to speak with her directly. On the record, something the old version of me would never have had the courage or the standing to do. I did not ask her to make me look sympathetic. I asked her to simply print what was true. The piece she published ran on the front page of the business section, and for the first time in either of my lives, my name appeared in print connected to the truth instead of to someone else's cover story. The investigation took 4 months to conclude. Camille was charged with financial fraud and served 2 years before a plea agreement reduced her sentence, though her name in the industry was finished long before any judge ever ruled on it. My father resigned from the board voluntarily, and Diane left the estate quietly 6 months later, taking very little with her, because very little of what she thought she owned had ever truly been hers to begin with. Camille came to see me once more before her sentencing, still wearing the same practiced hurt she had used against me for over a decade. You have ruined my entire life, she said. No, Camille, I said. You ruined mine first, and I simply stopped agreeing to carry it for you. My father came to me once more that year, standing in the doorway of an office that used to belong to men who had never once considered giving it to me, honestly. I am sorry, Sienna, he said. I believe that you are sorry, I told him. I do not believe it changes anything. Some debts do not get repaid with an apology, not after 11 years, not after everything it cost me to finally stop paying them myself. I asked Warren once, months later, why he had kept those records for 3 years before I ever thought to ask him for them. Someone in this family needed to know the truth eventually, Miss Sienna, he said. I did not know it would be you who finally asked. I run the company now entirely on my own terms, with Warren still beside me and a board that answers to results, rather than to whichever family member happens to be favored that season. I do not speak to Camille. I do not speak to Diane. I speak to my father perhaps twice a year, briefly, politely, the way you might speak to someone you used to know in another life. I used to think that being needed by my family was the same thing as being loved by them. It took dying once, and living long enough a second time to watch the truth unfold in daylight, to finally understand that those were never the same thing at all. I am no longer the daughter who takes the blame so someone else can keep smiling. I am simply the one who survived long enough to stop letting them decide what my life was worth.